Alright, we'll cut that out of the video. That's all. We'll just cut it out. Oh god. That was like much required. It's like sit on my ass trying to like set this shit up. Alright. Give myself like a couple seconds. We'll start. And a 1, and a 2, and a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is it wrong if I slouch like that? Alright. So let's begin. So this is going to be a review podcast or review video. I probably do one or the other, or maybe both. I don't know. About the classic Phantasy Star games. Which is, let's see if we can do this in order. Phantasy Star 1, 2, Text Adventures, Gaiden, Portable, 3, and then 4. I'm a little shaky on Gaiden / Portable. One of them was for the Game Gear. I think there was just one game for the Game Gear, and I think that was Gaiden. One of the others, I didn't play it. I did play it, and Portable I didn't play it because I think Portable is the name of the new one that came out on the DS. I think that might be called like something else, like X-Zero or something like that. I can't remember. But those are all the classic Phantasy Star games. As all of those games, they all revolve around the storyline of the original storyline, which starts in Phantasy Star 1, based on the algo system and the story of what happens to the characters there, and how it interacts with all feature games and characters, blah blah blah. That story ends at Phantasy Star 4, where it's concluded. And then the games at the new next generation, basically, which is Phantasy Star... I can get this right. That's steam coming out my ears. My brain's working overtime for this. I think it's just simply Phantasy Star Online, which then becomes Phantasy Star Online 2. There's multiple episodes, and then they went to the DS, which I think is Phantasy Star 0 and or Portable. And then there's another one. Just it's on the tip of my tongue. There was another one. Trust me. Either Portable or on the PS3 / GameCube / something, and then eventually re-released on PC. If I did that correctly, that's basically There's one more. There was one on the Xbox. I remember this vividly. Anyways, these were all the games that are released, and that's part of the second wave of Phantasy Star, which I'm not covering. I would like to do a second wave stuff. I mean, I could probably play some of them. I like to try them out, see how the series evolved. But today, my focus is on the original classics, right? So the first wave, essentially. So I basically played them all except the Game Gear games and the text adventures. And the reason why I didn't do the text adventures is basically it was like a download off of like Sega's like very limited, what's it's called, that Sega Retro, not Sega Retro, it had an online adapter for the Sega Genesis, their own personal one, and they got their own Sega store and stuff like that, and one of them was the Phantasy Star 2 Text Adventures. It's canon, it's very boring, not a lot of people played it, because you know how you're supposed to get it, so yeah. That was the thing, so that's why I just skipped over. It's just going to be a game that people just don't play. Come on, to get real. The other one I didn't play, which is the Game Gear version, and I don't have a lot of reasons why I didn't play it, but I can tell you that maybe in the future I will play it, Generally, I'm not a fan of the Game Gear. I'm not a fan of the games on the Game Gear. I'm not saying that the Game Gear is bad, but I might be implying that the Game Gear might be bad. Um, it's also one of the interesting. I think the Gaiden or the Portable, whatever it's called, I'll look it up after this just to verify it. Um, it was never re-released. I don't think it was. I'll have to look that one up if it was ever re-released on any other platforms, because every Phantasy Star game has had a re-release at some point, including number 3. Number 3 had a re-release, and there's a lot of things I want to talk about number 3, but that's skipping ahead. But yeah, I don't think Gaiden ever had a re-release or anything like that. So it's just like, it's a game, it's there, it existed. It's probably garbage for all we know. I don't know. It's actually just mostly a side story. It has like nothing to do with anything, really. It's a completely, totally different thing. So let's get started. We're gonna start with Phantasy Star 1, and this is now. Oh, I forgot to mention there are 2 games remakes, not remasters. I did play them. It was a remake of 1 and 2. I just finished 2, and I have a lot of strong feelings for it right now. The very, very strong words to describe that remake. Anyways, let's go back to what I said. We're going to start on Phantasy Star 1. And then I'll talk about the remake and how it compared to the original. And then I'll talk about the unique port, which I only recently found out is there is a unique port of Phantasy Star 1 on the Switch. Again, we'll talk about that later. So Phantasy Star 1. This came out on the Sega Master System. Yes, Master System. Yes, okay, Master System. Alright, so the Sega Master System is basically Sega's foray into challenging the not the SNES, wow, that'll be terrible, the NES. So they wanted to challenge them and enter the market with it. It was not very popular, as you can tell. It wasn't super popular in the US. I think it bombed really hard advertising-wise. It's like, I didn't even know what a Master System was until like past 10 years. Like 10 years ago was like the first time I ever heard what a Master System was. And I've never played a game on the Master System until the last 6 months, which was Phantasy Star 1. So that goes to show how popular it was. It wasn't very widespread compared to the Nintendo Entertainment System, which everyone had an NES. That's why everyone recalls NES games and whatnot. It's also probably why you don't really see Master System games in events, showcases, speedruns, because it's so hard to get, and they were so rare, and they just didn't proliferate in the same way. So, that's a little backstory about the Master System. Now, one of the brain Star Child games, like the Super Swan song or whatever of the Master System, was Phantasy Star. It was the game that defined the Master System. It put it on the map, strangely enough. Was it a good game? Was it a bad game? Okay, I'm going to try to make this whole talk about it in perspective initially of what it was like at the time. And then we're going to go back to the future and say how bad it is. When we talk about the remakes and the remasters and so on and so forth. Basically, it shook the gaming world by a very unique plot. It was a first for the main character to actually be a chick instead of a dude. That was a huge shift. I was like, oh my god, what are you doing? You know, that's what people were thinking. And it created a very, very cool dungeon system, movement system that was probably not seen in very many games. And it was really cool, actually, the dungeon movement system. And it actually was used, probably that same system was used in Sega Genesis games, looking at you shining in the darkness, who have a very good dungeon. Uh, was it exploration system? Is probably based off of Fantasy Star One. So Fantasy Star One. Let's just start. So basically, let's talk about the story. Uh, Fantasy Star One, you play as Alyssa or Alice, because they could only fit like 4 letters as the name. So we'll call Alyssa, or her real name was Alyssa, which they've written in the book, Alyssa Landau, and she is the main character. All she knows is that she was an orphan and that she was taken in by Nero, who she makes her like into her like a blood brother. And then of course everyone's happy, well yada yada yada. The king, Lassic, goes full power hungry and says, "Yeah, I'm gonna shut all this down. Just gonna be a dictator. I'm gonna be a douchebag." He comes in, he crashes in on everything, and he will eventually kill Nero because he suspects Nero is a spy. Um, and then Alyssa's like, "No, you can't die. I will avenge you. I will kill Lassic," and thus the game begins. So you play as her, and you're running around collecting people, getting money, finding Uber weapons, Murder King. Yay, game's over. Or so we think. That's the general gist of it. Story-wise, that's it. The remakes do a good job of expanding that story, besides just go kill King. There is actually text, though. They do put some lore in the original. But this was like during the infancy of video gaming, of a home video gaming, like at home, and RPGs. So a lot of people probably, when they were making these games, didn't they didn't have a roadmap of what works and then what doesn't work. They didn't have that. So when they made this game, it's like, okay, we'll try throwing it together. So maybe the player might like this, and maybe the player needs that. I don't know. We're just gonna make a good game and just hopefully it works out. I guess. I don't know. Okay, that was probably them in the '90s, early '90s, late '80s, and trying to make video games. 'Cause the wheel wasn't invented yet. So, um, overall, I think it conveys the message of the story it was trying to do at the most basic level, which is important. The characters are quirky and fun. You get obviously Alyssa or Alice. Uh, you get a muscat by the name of Okay, so I was. It's either meow or Mayao, depending on who you ask. It's either meow or meow, I guess. I have yet to figure out which is the proper way to say his name, so I'm gonna go with Mayao, who's a muscat who is smart enough that he's a super muscat, not just any muscat, a super muscat, and he has the intelligence to talk to other humans. But unfortunately, he does not have opposable thumbs, so because he doesn't have opposable thumbs, there comes a scene where Maya has his friend Odin, another character you're gonna unlock. I think he was renamed Tyrone in the or Ty something in the Japanese version. The Japanese version and the U.S. version, between the names of these guys, are different. Alyssa's still Alyssa, Mayo's still Mayo, Odin and Tyrone, and then Lutz and Noah. Well, anyways, he gets turned to stone, and you have to basically get a potion that will cure petrification. And Mayo happens to have it around his neck. But he doesn't have opposable thumbs, so he can't put the potion onto. It was the silliest like way around it. Like, oh yeah, you had to do it because I don't have thumbs. I thought that was the greatest thing ever. But yeah, so basically, you're running around to collect these characters to join your party, go on this adventure to eventually kill them. Eventually, you get to there's 3 planets, and it's based on the Algos' star system. There are 3 worlds. Um, and you start off on Palma, and you eventually go into Motavia, and then you eventually go Desorius, the ice world, Motavia, the hot desert world, and then Palma, the Earth-like world. And Those are the three main worlds, and you're running around through the galaxy collecting these, trying to figure out how to kill Lassic, um, which you will eventually do, and you will eventually learn that you need these powerful Laconian style weapons, which are like Laconia is like this god material, and when used, it is like the most powerful equipment. You learn I need these Laconian equipment to defeat Lassic. You can also go around collecting magical items because Lassic apparently lives in a hidden floating castle, and you need something like an arrow prism in the Eclipse Torch to reveal these things. Actually, no, you don't need the Eclipse Torch is needed for another reason, but the arrow prism needed to reveal like hidden objects. So you're basically the whole point of the game is you're running around collecting these items to just get to Lassic and kill him. Like literally, there's nothing else. There's no side stories or anything. You just kill Lassic, and the game drives that point home with the items you need and everything. Um, when you're playing the game, um, combat was really cool in this game. It's just your generic. You walk around the map, collect chests full of items, go to cities, buy more stuff, better stuff, explore dungeon, kill monster again until you get to Lassic. Yay, everyone's dead. Um, basically your generic RPG. Combat system was the most generic combat system you could ever see in a RPG. It was pretty straightforward, um, which is good. I mean, it's hard to ruin it. Um, except one of the unique twists is, unlike any RPG of the time, there was actual enemies created a noise. It was like basically like a computer. It's like beep boop bop. And they did that. I think there was a actual expansion, music expansion that actually gave them better noises than that. But otherwise, that was interesting. The monsters were very well detailed and drawn through pixel art, which was really good. And most importantly, they were all animated. This was during a time that was like, oh my god, you're animating monsters? Oh my god, we need to do like the Final Fantasy method, which is static pictures until it dies, but it looks pretty, I guess. So that was like a huge, amazing like leap they did, and like, hey, these are animated, like, and I saw it like, wow, that's really impressive for a game in like the late '80s, early '90s to actually do. Because there wasn't a lot of storage space on those old game cartridges. There really wasn't. So you can imagine how many tricks they had to do just to be able to do that. Uh, the only downside of combat, and the one thing I hate about combat is, I mean, you have your standard attacks, you got magical spells, and you use items like potions. It's your standard stuff. Um, but the monsters is there can only be one monster type, and it's only duplications of it, and you cannot control which monster gets hit. And this stood out, and I really hated this. So if you run into, let's say, I don't know, a giant spider, it always was just going to be the one image of the spider, and there may or may not be 1 to 4 of them. And there's won't be 4 sprites on the screen. There'll just be one sprite on the screen that would be animated, and in the top right, you would have, hey, there are 4 spiders. Here's their HP values, and I really hated it so much. So I mean, I can understand due to the limitations of the animations and the sprite level they had to do, but the fact that you couldn't hit specific monsters in that group was horrifyingly bad, like really bad. Um, so what this means is you can do on your first round of combat, you can attack, use your sword, use may out claw, use a battle axe gun, whatever. This is a sci-fi setting. There are guns in this, but the original game doesn't really push it. So it's not as prevalent. It's there, but it's not there, This game was also renowned for entering the sci-fi, um, the sci-fi level thing. They got really into it. It was probably the first game to actually seriously do it. They're like, hey, here's a sci-fi theme. No one's done this before. It's not Arthurian. Although they really stuck with the Arthurian mostly, but they use a lot of sci-fi elements to kind of progress the story. And there are sci-fi weapons. But basically, yeah, everyone's attacking, but you can't control who's attacking what. So it's possible that you can hit an enemy, get it down to 1 HP, and then get the worst target rolls for every other character for that battle round, or even for the next battle round. Every character will get a bad target roll and hit any monster except the monster that was just about to die, and you would have no control over it. And that was really, really frustrating to play the game when you had that issue. It wasn't so bad at the start of the game, but as the game progressed, when enemies had like over 100 HP per monster, it's like, okay, this guy's almost dead. You're gonna hit him, right? He's almost dead. You're gonna hit him, right? 3 rounds later, you're gonna hit him, right? I mean, please. So, that was just a huge, huge issue with combat. Luckily, bosses would just be one monster, no groups, no nothing, just kill said monsters. It was not too bad. There was a weapon, guns, which had an all attack, and basically you could not play the game unless you had guns on Tyrone. He was the only guy who can carry it, and it would allow him to hit every monster in the group for a fixed amount of damage. So it wasn't the strongest weapon in the game, but it was very consistent and would hit every monster. Speaking of weapon consistency in this game, one round you might do 100 damage with the Laconian Super Sword, the next round you might do 10. That talks about the consistency of weapon damage in this game, and oh god. So when I got to the end of the game, because of that issue with weapon consistency damage, and stats in this game don't really drive up your strength. There's no strength value actually really in this game. And there's no like toughness value. It's just defense and attack. Defense becomes from your equipment you're wearing, and attack comes from the weapon. So your damage values are always in a fixed range, and then it's modified by enemy's defense value or whatever. So it's possible that you get the low rolls on every possible attack, and Alyssa, with the best weapon in the game, will do, after 4 attacks, will do no more than 30 damage. So, wow, it's bad. Considering like the endgame monsters have like hundreds and hundreds of HP, like we're talking like the final boss like 400, 500 HP, like they're tough. They have a lot of HP. That's a big deal. Like, so a lot of my finishing up of the game eventually resorted to save states. I would do the same boss fight and many permutations of it until I got a fight where I got nothing but medium or high rolls, and then there you go, I won the game because I finally got lucky, basically. But there was ways around it. In that increasing your level will increase your MP totals, it will increase your HP totals, so you can survive much longer, and there were items that gave you a lot of HP back and stuff like that. And those will help you stay in the fight longer while trying to hopefully get good rolls. This is where Odin, or Tyrone, would become the most sought after character in the game. Because with guns, like I said earlier, you always do a consistent set damage. So if a gun does 20 damage, it will always do 20 damage to all characters. So when you finally get to fighting the final bosses, whereas like Alyssa's going from like 40 damage down to 5 damage, back to 20 damage to maybe 3 damage, Tyrone was always doing 20 damage. And that allowed you to some consistency in a boss fight. And as long as you kept him alive, you would have a chance at winning. The only other character that's similar to that is Magic, which is with Lutz, also known as Noah, but I'll keep referring to him as Lutz because in every game after the first, he's referred to as Lutz. And Lutz uses spells. Spells also have a damage range, but it's very tight. So it's not like between 1 and 50, it's like more like, hey, here your damage range is going to be between like 20 and 30, which is a lot more manageable. But it does cost magic, and magic is, well, hard to come by. And that's how that rolls. So, early on the game is pretty interesting, pretty cool. But as the game progresses, due to how the combat system works, unfortunately, it becomes a very large drag late in the game, and it sucks so much. It's just so bad. It's really dice rolling. So basically, you just need a high level to stay alive and just roll with it. The problem with that, staying alive and just get a high level, is no one knew this during again time they were inventing the wheel, like how fast should a character level, and it's very slow. On top of that, when you kill a monster, you get a treasure chest because you got to get the gold and it's got to make sense. We'll put the money in the treasure chest and you open it up and hey, here's money. Um, that's great and it's really cool when you see it for the first couple times. But damn, does that slow down the game by the end of the game where you don't really need money? Like, just give me experience. Like, stop menuing. I just want to continue getting experience or something. Um, so yeah, that's what that's all about. And it just slows down the game. The experience in money games is very low, and you're spending a lot of time um, just grinding. Uh, I'm gonna later at the end of this review for Phantasy Star 1, I am going to talk about how that was fixed in the re-releases and the remakes. But yeah, that's basically the combat system. Story-wise, it was solid combat, looked really pretty. It was okay until you got to the end of the game where the whole system fell apart. Uh, the scenery when you're moving between the worlds though is super vibrant. It was really, really well done. Uh, Palm was lush and green. It had varied types of terrain and whatnot, and that was really cool. You eventually get boats, which was really cool. Like, hey, that's really cool. Final Fantasy did it too, but it was cool. Um, the towns were really nice looking, and when you talk to characters in towns, it's not just, oh, here's the text box, blah blah blah, I'm a guard. No, instead it would be like, black out, black in, you actually see a physical, like, real portrait of them with the backdrop saying, yes, I'm a guard, I'm holding this gun, and I'm really, like, high poly count, high sprite count, something like that. It was really cool they did that. They did that with shops anytime you enter buildings, so it was really cool that they did that like that. It like bring out the characters, allows them to make them more detailed and stuff like that. Um, then you go to Motavia, looks beautiful by the way. The desert layout and the poison gas fields and stuff like that, and the ant lions, that was also really well done. I wonder what happened to the ant lions. They must have disappeared. I'll talk about it later, but about the ant lions. I mean, I think that they may come back. They came back in the second game, but I'll give you my theory on that. But then you go, of course, you got Dazorus, which is a beautiful ice world with get the beautiful little ice domes, and you can knock those down with the ice digger and whatnot. Which, by the way, Land Rover, ice digger, really cool. I loved it. Hated that you had to buy this stuff, which was an essential item, and you had to buy it, but you can't win all the time. You really can't. Music is amazing. I'm still humming it from when I last play it. I love the title music. I love we go over the overworld. I love that. City music was okay. Combat music I hated. But overall, more than not, I liked it a lot. It was pretty good. I liked the music, especially the dungeon music. That was really good. The dungeon music, it was so good that they ended up reusing it in Phantasy Star 4. So I bet you they reused it in future games as well. Speaking of dungeons, it's probably the last thing that we're really looking at is dungeons. Basically, you gotta eventually kill monsters and explore, find stuff, blah 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 blah. Basically, you have to walk through a dungeon, and there was no map, no nothing. So you would have to draw your own map when you explore every dungeon. I got lazy about like a fourth of the way through the game and just looked up maps that people made of the dungeons. You might as well. Luckily, a lot of this stuff was addressed in the remakes and re-releases, which I'll get to at the end of this review of the classics. Um, so those were our pretty good. They were very vibrant colored. They had really good music. Um, but there's not much to say. I mean, that's basically it. I mean, they were convoluted as hell as the game progressed. Unnecessarily convoluted. So if you didn't have a map, it was very painful. But if you had a map, it wasn't too bad. So that was that. Oh yeah, there's something important I do want to talk about of the game is the game was surprisingly very good at leading to you to where you're supposed to go. That was really they were really good about that. Um, Surprising for a game that old. They actually that's the one thing they did right. They point you in the right direction. It was we know like how in the classic days like it was always cryptic though. Like you got to do this, but we're not gonna point at it. We're just saying something very cryptic that may point to it. It's might what you should be doing, but we're not gonna verify that's what you're supposed to do. You know that there was a lot of that. But a lot of older games were like that. So. But like I said, overall the game was beautiful, especially when you transition between the worlds because you have to take a starship to fly around, and you fly to Motavia, you'll fly to Desaurus, and when they did that, the animations and everything that was really nice, and whatnot. Um, okay, right, the end game. So you're running around collecting things to just basically kill Elastic. You get into his aerodome. Again, oh, there was cutscenes in this game. There are actual cutscenes. They actually did cutscenes, like anime style cutscenes, uh, from like a manga or something. And those are very, very well drawn and well everything. And when you get to the air castle, um, there's this really cool scene that you'll see, which I don't want to spoil everything. I mean, you can't spoil it. You got to play the game if you want to see it. And it was very, very well done. Which brings me actually to the next point about bosses. This game treats bosses like normal enemies, and you're not sure if you're fighting a boss or not. Because you're supposed to eventually go around and kill some dragons and whatnot, but one of my issues with the game was a lot of it didn't feel like you were fighting a boss, you know? It really didn't, you didn't feel like you were fighting bosses, except the Mad Doctor. You fought the Mad Doctor, he felt like a boss. You fought the Gold Dragon, it felt like a boss. You fought Classic Lassic, he felt like a boss. But that was it. Like, there was actually more bosses. You had to fight the Black Dragon, the Red Dragon, the White Dragon. Because each of those are the whole, is it the Amber Eye? Black Dragon was just in his castle, I think. I can't remember. Where was the Black Dragon? You had to kill a Black Dragon somewhere, okay? I can't remember why, but you had to kill it. And the Gold Dragon you kill on the way to the air castle. And that was probably like the coolest looking sprite in the whole game right there was the air dragon. Of course then you get to Classic Lassic and okay, so here's my issue. They didn't think this through. When you got to the air castle, you would have you couldn't fly back from the air castle to get back to Palma. So if you saved, you can save anywhere in this game as long as you're in a friendly town. If you saved on the air castle and you didn't have like a city return item, you soft lock. Like after how many hours you get to the castle, and if you forget that you didn't bring like a teleport item or you run out of magic and you can't teleport, you soft lock. That was the biggest oversight in the whole game. And I actually did that. I actually did soft lock, and I was like, I didn't soft lock. I almost soft locked. I kill Lassic. I get out of the dungeon, and I realized I had exactly one remaining MP left over what I needed to get back to a city. And I was like, oh my god, I totally forgot about that. I didn't realize that was a thing. And had a freakout session. Um, but yeah, that was really dumb of them when they did that. Luckily, in the remakes and re-releases, I think they fixed that. Especially in the remakes, I vividly thank them that they actually did something about that. Yeah, you enter, you fight Lassic. Of course, you got that BS battle with Lassic where he can party hit you, and of course I already talked about the issues with how combat works and all the dice rolling. Oh god. So yeah, that was one annoying boss fight to have to do. But eventually when you kill him, it felt good. And then you go back, and hey, the game's over. You're supposed to report back to the governor. The governor hated Lassic because of what he did. And okay, let's report back to the governor. And you do it. He's like, oh, he's not there. And then oh, there's another dungeon. I thought the game was over. Crap, I didn't save. You know, something like that. Luckily, I did save when that happened. And of course, I was like wondering, like, why are we going through the governor's mansion? I was looking at the maps, and then oh, okay, the game wasn't over. And then you get the probably the coolest boss ever, coolest villain, period. I should use the name that was given in the first two games, which is Dark Fowls. And it was only called Dark Fowls because of character limitations of the cartridge and the coding. His full name is Dark Force, though. And he was the real final boss. Luckily, he was a lot easier to get to than freaking Lassic. But Dark Force was roughly as difficult as Lassic. He had like a Tonka truck, but I think it was only on a single character, so it wasn't too bad. So overall, it's like a real final boss. You know, he was a lot better than trying to hunt down Lassic. Of course, you kill him, and then like, hey, you did it. You did it, kid. You did it. And then that was basically the end of Phantasy Star 1. It turns out that Alyssa was a oh god, I don't want to spoil that. You have to waste 10 hours of your life to get softlocked in Lassic's castle to only realize, oh wow, shoot, and then play another 10 hours of terrible grinding to get back to that same point. To remember to bring a teleportation item with you and whatnot. So overall, if I was to rate the game, like straight up rate it for what it was then, I would probably give like 2.5 to 3 stars, about, out of 5, roughly. The premise of what they wanted to do was really good. The visuals were amazing. Sound effects, not so much. Combat was cool. The cutscenes were cool. The storyline was, well, whatever was of it, was cool. I mean, the premise of what you're trying to do there. The idea that you're moving around the dungeon, the idea of that was really cool. But I feel like the execution of the game wasn't fully realized, and they made a lot of glaring issues. So that's why, like, at best, I could say 3. At worst, I might say 2.5 kind of thing. It was a good game. I thought it was an okay game. It's not for everyone, clearly. But for all of its faults, I thought it was not bad. It was a good introduction, and during a time where no one really knew how to make games, really. Like, they didn't have like a guidebook that says, hey, if you want to make a good RPG, you do this number 1 line, number 1. Never soft lock the character, the guy who's playing the game, I'm just saying. Like, they didn't have that yet. So for what they did, I think it was pretty good, and whatnot. And that's going to lead into Phantasy Star 2 pretty well, because Phantasy Star 2 is a direct sequel to Phantasy Star 1. But before I do, I want to talk about Generation 1, the remake and the remaster for the Switch. Now, this game was re-released on multiple platforms: GBA, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, Switch. It was constantly re-released. But the Switch re-release was different. They realized, okay, the game's okay, it's good, but what can we do to make it better without changing the game? Alright, let's get the player a map. Thank you. Let's make it easy access to looking at your stats of your characters. Thank you. By the way, let's speed up the game. We have a fast forward button. Oh, and yeah, you know that grinding view is so much hated? Yeah, we're going to get rid of that grind and we're going to quadruple all experience and money gained.
Thank you.
So a lot of the big issues of the game, or many of the big issues, was rectified in the re-release on the Switch, and that was really cool of Sega and the remaster team, Sega Aegis. So thank you for that. That actually greatly improves the game, and that definitely would bolster the review score there. The remake, back in the mid 2000s, early mid 2000s, Sega hired a company to remake a limited select games from the Genesis. Two of them got through. One was Generation 1 Phantasy Star 1. Two was Phantasy Star 2 Generation 2. These are remakes. These were not re-releases. So they actually went back, they tried to capture the feel of the original game and say, okay, how can we make it better? Let's remake the game. The updated graphics, updated everything. Unfortunately, it was never released in the US or Europe. But fans have translated the game, so they are totally playable, thanks to that. Basically, Generation 1, the remake, resolved a lot of problems, but still kept the game in the boundaries of what the original was. So they improved magic significantly. They made elemental combos. They put in elements, thank God. They had accessories, which wasn't there before. They had better animations, better updated drawings and whatnot. Actual boss fights, thank you. But most importantly, they gave a game with a framework of a story, an actual story, and that was huge. When I played the original on the Master System, and then went on to play the remake, I was blown away because there's an actual story, and they actually expanded on it and was like, wow, this is good. Like, really good. I liked it. So that was good. I liked that a lot. And it really helped give everyone, like, personify their character of all the four main characters. It actually gave them a backstory, gave them some oomph, like they're not just a character that kills things like, hey, that's all I do. I don't have any, quirks about me. And then they actually gave them quirks and whatnot. And I really liked that a lot. They did a very, very good job on that. So overall, the remake is definitely, if you're ever going to play it, either play the Switch version or play the remake. Definitely. I mean, the remake has its own quirks and issues, but overall, it's pretty faithful, and the expanded story is not that bad at all. So, like, if I was to rate the remake compared to the original, I would definitely say 3.5, hands down. Hands down, not even a range, just 3.5. Like, it's not half bad at all. Like, at period. But it's like, it's not something you would enjoy if you never played the original. It's like, wow, this game is shit. That's it. That's probably what you'll say when you play it if you never played the original. But when you play the original and then you play the remake, then it's like, oh, this is a really good update to a classic game. So is that. That's my thoughts on the remake. Overall, is very good, and I really liked it, to be honest. If I would never play the original ever again, except for the Switch version. That'll be the only time I'll play the original. Alright, so we're going to lead into the next thing, which is Phantasy Star 2. Phantasy Star 2 came out early in the Genesis lifespan. So it was one of the first games, so they had to kind of rush it out. Graphically, on the outset, it was improved, but on the overworld and in the cities, it didn't really look that much different than Phantasy Star 1. In fact, Phantasy Star 1 in some areas actually looked better um, than Phantasy Star 2. That was a huge shortfall, was the graphics in that game, like big time. The, I mean, you can tell like it had more bits and bobs to work with, but it fell short compared to the first game. But the combat graphics, oh baby, that was significantly better. It was really particularly good. Um, the animations for actual combat, you can actually see your character physically fighting for the first time instead of like here, ching 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 ching, that kind of thing. Like no, you actually see him go ching. Sound effects not included, by the way. But yeah, no, it was pretty good graphically and sound wise, which was really good. They even updated the magic, the way they look, which was really cool. All the enemies were 100% fully animated now. Um, and they also look really good too. Um, music wise, I was really unimpressed, except maybe the combat music. Yeah, yeah. It's not as I've never, after playing the original and then playing the remake, I'm sitting here, I'm like, I'm not humming any of this. Sorry. Like, it's just not coming to me. Music's just not memorable at all. Basically, the story is you are an agent for the government of Motavia, and there's biomonsters. They weren't there before, I swear. So please stop biomonsters. Okay. You take a chick with you that you brought under your wing. She was almost slaughtered by bandits. So like, okay, let's sting her. I know she's not a human. She looks like a human, but she's got pointy ears. She's like an elf human, but we don't call them elves. And basically, you're gonna move around and try and figure out where the monsters come from. And it turns out, the world's becoming unstable. Some being is creating these monsters through a biological lab, blah blah blah. Let's go find and stop them. Alright. So you go around, you finally find who it is. No spoilers here. You kill it. Unfortunately, cute pointy girl dies. Um, and then you realize, oh no, robots are attacking. Because the world is managed to run by what's called Mother Brain, which is like a supercomputer that deals with all the entire climate, climate control, weather control, creating this peaceful species of fauna and flora, and being little animals that are good for stuff like that for the humans living there and for farming, whatever, blah blah blah. And turns out this being was draining power from Mother Brain, and it's like, okay, yeah, let's kill it. Oh, killed cool chick, she died. Sorry. And then turns out, oh yeah, you were trying when you destroyed it, and the power surged back into the planet because this being was stealing the power. It caused all havoc, and now Mother Brain's like, yeah, I'm going to kill you now because you messed up my world. And now you got robot guards chasing, trying to kill you. And like, okay, well, the world's gonna flood because the water's out of control and the climate's out of control. Let's open dams. Okay, you open up the dams, and then, oh, we finally got you. We arrested you. Let's throw you into outer space. And then you come back to the planet. Somehow you'll escape. Not saying anything. Oh, by the way, a planet just blew up. Anyways, as you can see, the story is kind of all over the place, but eventually you discovered you have to stop Mother Brain because she's going AWOL no matter what you do. And eventually you'll find out who or what is Mother Brain and eventually kill it. I think. I think. um, okay, across the board, they tried to improve the formula from Phantasy Star 1. And they did. But it really wasn't much of an improvement. That's the best way of saying it. It still felt a lot like Fantasy Star 1, where nothing really makes sense, and you have. It was worse in that you had absolutely no clue where you were going, and the dungeons were even more complicated than the first game. Ugh. I hate the dungeons in 2. You go up, there's 5 floors, and you have to go up and down between all 5 floors about 20 times just to get to the exit. It was like a freaking rat maze to go through these dungeons. They were really poorly designed. Um, Even the cities had puzzles to them. Like there's like a hidden building, and there was no indicator that it was a hidden building, but you had to go there um, in order to advance the story. I hated that so much. That killed me. And he had this game has the same scaling issue as the first game too, where that there is no strength or toughness value. It's just attack and defense, which means you're only as strong or as tough as the armor and weapons that you have. Same issue as the freaking first game, which means the only way you get stronger is by getting a better weapon. So your level, again, doesn't really matter apart from more HP and more, not magic this time, magic apparently is dead, techniques. So there's that. Um, so the formula didn't change too much, but they did learn a lot from the first game in that we really don't need bosses. Bosses not required. They really brought that over from the first game. While there was bosses in the first game, they didn't really stand out. Here, there's only 3 bosses in the entire game. I counted. I is good at math. I has big brain. I's got big brain. There's only 3 bosses. One about a third of the way through the game, and there is 2 exactly at the end of the game. Now, there's a 4th guy. You may fight me over it that he's a boss. Let's get real. He's not a boss. It's just like a timed event that you have to survive, and then oh, there you go, done. So let's get real. Let's get real. Yeah. So this game, they added so many cool spells to this game, but because there was no bosses and no big fights, what was the point of the spells? I never understood that. You had all this cool stuff and you don't use it because there's just nowhere to use it. This was the first game where like legit, all the way up until that first boss, like I have this magic and like I've been dying to use it. I have all these potions, I've been dying to use them, and there hasn't been a boss, and now like I'm almost halfway through the game. Where's an enemy I can use it on? It was so bad. And then once I kill that first boss, like, okay, I'll hold on to the stuff again, and then like, where's the next boss, please? I'd like to use items, please. Game, please. But yeah, that was so bad. I really don't like 2. Finster 2. They did a lot right, and they did a lot even worse than the first game. And that's like my biggest factor of like things I hate. And luckily they got rid of the dice rolling, thank God. There's no combat range really. But even though there's no combat range, you're only as strong as your weapon. So when you get to the final game, you're always gonna be as, regardless if you're level 100 or level 1, you're always gonna do the same damage. And that's just frustrating. It's unbelievably frustrating. The enemy designs were really cool. The way they were animated were really cool. The quest that you go on was not so cool. The story was so bad. It didn't make sense, and you kind of forget about the story of what on Earth you're trying to do. It's not like constantly drilled in your head, hey, we're here to kill Lassic. Here, no, it's like, we need to do thing about Mother Brain, I think. Question mark. So I forgot to update the picture. That is Rolf. He's the main character. I actually don't even remember his last name. Like that's how unmemorable he was. He barely talked in this game. Period. Um. So yeah, you came back. I'm just gonna explain the story again. You come back, and then planet Palma actually blows up because a space station slams into Palma, and somehow that's enough to blow a planet up. I'm not a planet blowing specialist, but I think that's how you kill planets. That was such a bad plot advancement. Period. Stupid plot advancement. Um, and flying ships is prohibited, but apparently we have a ship on Palma that can, oh sorry, Motavia that can take you to Desaurus because we had to do the three worlds thing, except Palma kind of blew up, so due to budget restraints, we can't go to Palma. That's why they blow up Palma because budget restraints. Let's get real. So you do eventually will go to Desaurus, but unlike the first game where you're going through tunnels to get to cities and stuff like that, you have to go through a spaceport, like a really big open air spaceport, in a more now see we can't just have dungeons in dungeons. We need to have dungeons everywhere according to the developers of Phantasy Star 2. So just to move around the Zolist is a dungeon. So stupid. But luckily there is teleportation systems in this game, so you can teleport towards cities you've already been to. So thank God they had that, and that will allow you to quickly move around the map. The real way to move around the map. Um, so thank God for that. Um, no ice sticker this time. There's a water hovercraft, but it's just there's nothing special about it. It's slow. It's ugly looking. They didn't do a good. They did not do this game justice. I'm gonna get real. They really didn't do this game justice. Um, what's much to say? I mean, this story was garbage. Now you will eventually find Lutz again. Spoiler alert. Because like I said, all these main games are all connected. Um, and Lutz actually he was in cryogenic sleep, and he's like, okay, this mother brain person is bad. Let's go to Dezolis because he was originally on Palma, and once he gets over to Dezolis, he goes back to cryogenic sleep, waiting for you, and he kind of tells you, by the way, yeah, this thing is kind of happening. I need you to kill it. Can you please kill Mother Brain? By the way, I have like 8 super rare items, and you need this arrow prism to see these dungeons that are on the overworld, which you need to go through a dungeon at the spaceport to get to these dungeons, which are dungeons that are even more complicated than the previous dungeons you did, that contain 2 items, and you need to have each and every item, which are in these very complicated dungeons, to get to the end of the game. And now I understand. Now, by the way, this game came with a hint book when you got it. Now I know why they brought the hint book into the game to the player, because you're not finishing this goddamn game without this. These dungeons were so bad. Like, if you did not have a hint book, you would just blow your brains out. It was so bad. The game should not require a hint book to play. Period. Oh my god. I hate Phantasy Star 2 so much. It was such a bad game. Dark Force is in the game. No spoilers. He's there. There is a Dark Force. You will kill him, like in every Phantasy Star game, but he was so less impactful in Phantasy Star 2. Like, he was there, but he wasn't the real evil. Like, how? What? That doesn't make sense. don't know, man. This game stunk. Like, I'm trying to find positives in it. It's just, it's such a huge step down from the original games, and that's sad because the original games weren't that amazing to begin with. They do all this great graphical, like they showcase, like, hey, we have amazing graphics. We updated the soundtrack. What do you think? And I'm sitting here, I'm going, where's the game? Oh, Jesus Christ. 3 bosses. One near the middle, about a third to a middle of the way through, and 2 right at the end of the game. Oh yeah. What can I say that was good about it? I mean, I, I'm just speechless. Like, they made the stats system stunk still for combat. Combat was awful. No bosses to use cool abilities on. Leveling was mostly unimportant. Graphically, the game was okay. They got rid of the transitions when you move between planets. They actually got rid of that. Mostly got rid of it, I believe. Uh, they actually had, you had a house, and you can actually, you had like what, 6 party members, so you can actually change who's in your party, which was really cool. Except everyone starts at level 1. So when you decide to get a new character, like, I don't know, Anna, who's a particularly good character, she has an all attack. Yeah, you get her at near the end of, before the first, like, let's say, yeah, near the end of the before you fight the first boss. You'll get her. She's in the last city before you go to the final boss. You get her. Everyone's like, what, level 15, 20. She starts at level 1. Because, you know, reasons. That's all. Just reasons. Oh, by the way, you don't know if you're going to get a new character because a new character will only show up if you go back to your house. And I had no clue how to trigger a new character. So I actually did the first 3 dungeons without... You're supposed to have like 4 characters by the time you get to like the 3rd dungeon. I did with 2 characters. I didn't realize it was so poorly conveyed to the user. It was so stupid. Oh man. Dungeons are bad. Okay, look. Overall, it did provide some continuity. They did refer to the first game. They tried to provide, like, hey, here's game 1, 2. Here's game 1, 2, 4. There's the reason why I'm saying that when I get to the next game. But, so the connections are there. They could have done so much with this game. So much. If I was looking at it through that era, this is like a 2.0 game out of 5 stars. Even through the lens of the era, because you're comparing to the Phantasy Star 1. It was a cool step up. But like halfway through the game, I'll be like, wow, this game sucks. Basically. If your game needs a hint book to advance, it's not a good game. There are re-releases of the game. But there's only one but no, they're all the same, and there is a remake of the game. The remake is as bad as the original. I literally just finished the remake. You will have to bind me up, put me on a roasting pit, and then make me sing incredibly bad poems. I'd rather do all of that than play the remake and the original of Phantasy Star 2 again. But on a more bright note and positive note, the ending of Phantasy Star 2 was absurdly good. After taking what? The past 15 minutes bashing this game and saying this is the worst thing I've ever laid eyes on. I'll say that. The story at the end of it was really good. The premise and everything they were doing was so poorly done, and everything could be poorly executed, the worst execution. Don't even get me started that some items had magical properties, and the game never told you, and they were vital to winning the game. Wow. Okay, so let me explain that. There are items in this game. Some items will give you a defense shield. Some items will heal your party members. Some will attack the enemy. The game never tells you which items do that. You just have to experiment. Hello? Hi? The fuck? Oh my goodness. So, because of this, you spend most of your time avoiding battles because they're so boring and so bad. I mean, the animations are great, but damn, they're such boring. It's just basically slash slash slash. Don't use magic. You might fight a boss. You don't know that. And then when you actually get to Dark Force, he is absurdly hard. And I found out actually I skipped so many battles when I was trying to finish the game, rush it, both the remake and whatever. I was under level. So when you get to, I'm like, yeah, I know like stats are like based on the equipment you use and whatnot, but you need a certain amount of HP to stay in the match long enough to kill the guy. So it's like, and I didn't know about the items using spells, so that would have made it easier. And the final boss in the game, which is Mother Brain, is such a joke of a boss. Both of actually the final bosses are even more of a joke in the original, the remake. But in the original game, like, Mother Brain was absurdly weak, and like, what am I even fighting kind of boss. In the remake, they made an error in that, because they tried to update some of the mechanics to make it better, and by making it better, I mean make it worse. And everyone has limit breaks now, and about 90% of all limit breaks are useless, which includes Mr. Huey's limit break. In Huey's limit break, Huey is the biologist you'll get in the game. I'm not gonna go through every character because so much I hate it. Huey has an ability that allows him to damage all biological enemies and then paralyze them. Okay, well, Dark Force is considered a biological enemy, just like how Mother Brain somehow is considered a biological enemy, and you can paralyze them, which means they cannot move for that round. This is in the remake. So if you know about this, I don't think this was intentional. So if you knew that and you did that, the final boss, because to build up limit break meter, you just have to defend. That's the fastest way. You defend 2 turns, then on the 3rd turn, Huey can cast this paralysis limit break. And if you knew this, you could indefinitely put the final 2 bosses behind a paralysis. Behind paralysis for the entire fight. That was the stupidest. It trivialized the final bosses and made them that much less scarier. So, yeah. Phantasy Star 2, nah. Does not rate highly. For me. At all. Definitely not at all. I think that's all I have to say about Phantasy Star 2. And its remake. I'm fairly unimpressed. Coming from Phantasy Star 1. Especially the Phantasy Star 1 remake, which was absurdly good. Really good. To going to Phantasy Star 2 remake was like, where's You didn't really seriously expand the story. You didn't really add anything. The characters are still stale as hell. You didn't. They had all these cool new characters, and they didn't do what give them the same treatment like they did in one, where it's like, hey, let's give them a little bit more. Oh no, give them a little more character. They didn't even do that. It was so bad. Phantasy Star 2 remake was awful. Awful. Alright, speaking of awful games, let's move on to the next awful game. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Phantasy Star 3. Phantasy Star 3 is the black sheep of the Phantasy Star Classic family. If I could sum up Phantasy Star 3 in 5 words, it would be, it's a very bad game. It never had a remake, and but it has had re-releases, but they're exactly the same iterations. When they were making Phantasy Star 3, they had the smallest possible team ever. So all the graphics are garbage. There is no continuity with the other games, it's just a giant side story. The animations are shit. The monster designs have big asses. If okay, let me explain that one. The monster designs have big butts. No, I don't have to explain anything. Play the game. If you're a butts person, you'll very much appreciate what the I think the developer was also the main developer producer was also a butts person when it comes when it comes to monsters. So you'll greatly appreciate it. But oh my goodness, it is a bad game. Oh boy. It has the same issues that they use the same exact combat mechanics as Phantasy Star 2. Which means every character is only as strong as the weapon and armor they have. There's about 20 variations of the same monster, and you'll counter both variations the first time you'll start an area. I'll never get over that. You'll find a Rappy, and then 2 feet later in your next battle, you'll find the Rappy's variation, which is slightly stronger than the original Rappy. I'm like, what? Yeah, there's a lot of that in Phantasy Star 3. Especially near the end of the game, this is non-stop. It's such a bad game. um, so basically, let me talk about the story, and then I'll talk about the bad art and music. The story is you are Prince Rice, or Riss, and he comes. There's 2 main family lines, Arakio and Leyland. Or Layla. And these were 1,000 years ago. These royal families got into a huge clash, and they were taking their armies like, hey, I'm gonna fight Layla. Hey, I'm Arakio, I'm gonna fight Layla, and then I'm Layla, I'm gonna fight Arakio. By the way, don't kill anything. Don't kill another human being. Okay, everyone's like, okay. They go ahead, they fight, and unfortunately, they're both dead, and their armies were crushed. So he took his army of, he had an army, Arakio had an army of robots, and Layla had an army of monsters, bio-monsters. So, fast forward 1,000 years, Arakio and Leyland's hate each other still, and to circumvent around this idea of we can't kill another human being, but we still hate the other guy, we will use bio-monsters as Leylands to kill Arakians, and Arakians will build machines to kill Leylands. Anyways, this gets really tested when you start fighting bosses in this game. Which, by the way, there's not very many bosses, and they're bosses. They are bosses. So, anyways, you play as Prince Russ. He's a direct descendant from Orakio himself, and a strange lady go washes ashore. We don't know how or where she gets there, and we're gonna go back to this point. By the way, make sure just recall that we are going to come back to the fact that she comes on the shore. Okay, with that in mind, he wishes to marry her. He's fallen in love. Okay, okay. So they arrange a marriage, and just about to get married, a dragon appears and snatches the lady who has amnesia apparently, and she can't remember where she came from, snatches her up, and then flees. And Rice goes full, he goes full like Hulk there. Says, "I will find her. I'll bring her back. I'll kill every Leyland if I ever find one." And Kane's like, "Yo, kid, like there hasn't been a Leyland for like almost 1,000 years. What's up with you?" So you will go on an adventure to get this lady back. You have no clue who she is, and she has no clue who you are. And you want to marry her. Desperately. Now, the name of this game is called The Generations of Doom. In the US, it's different in Japan. I can't remember exactly what it is. And this is the only good thing about this game is you have generations. So once you finish the game with one generation, you move on to the next one, and that's gonna be your children. And the children has their own adventure and whatnot, and it's all based on what you did in the previous generation and who you're marrying. Keep that in mind, who you're marrying. So, anyways, you get thrown to jail, and you get busted out of the jail by your childhood friend, whom I didn't know was our childhood friend until after I read the game manual. Go me. So she busts you out, and then you go ahead and you go on this crazy adventure, and then someone gives you a gem, and you use this gem to enter a cave, which was sealed off for whatever reason. And you enter this cave, it's all electronic equipment all around you. And no one questions this, by the way, that there's this electronic equipment everywhere. We don't question it, just saying. Anyways, you move around the map and blah blah blah, you're trying to find this girl. You end up finding a few androids, they come on your journey, they help you out. Blah blah blah. Then after you find some androids, you kind of waltzing around like aimlessly, and then you find this really weird dude who's like, "Hey, I want to be on your side. I don't know who you are, but you're gonna want me." Oh, okay. You do that, and then you eventually go into this weird city, and everyone says, "Oh, we hate you." Who the hell are you people? Okay, so you just go to the palace, whatever, after wandering through the palace, and as you get to the end of the palace, this weird guy who joins your party, he's like, "By the way, give me a second." Okay. Wait a second. There's a lady over there on the other side of the screen. There's a wall between me, but I can see her. Trust me. And then you go over there, and it turns out, hey, that's my childhood friend. What is she doing here? Hey, sir, what are you doing here? I totally forgot your name because this game's so forgettable and so bad. And it's like, hey, yeah, let's fight. Wait, what? Boss fight ensues. That's how the first boss fight goes down. It's like, okay, you fight him, it's like, okay, it's a nothing fight. Wow, you're really strong. I'm gonna rejoin you. By the way, this lady's also gonna join our party. Let's go to the end of the game. Let's go to the end of the game right here, why don't we? So, okay, and that was the most confusing thing I've ever seen. And then you eventually go find the princess who's being guarded by the original king. Because he was like, this guy is a prince. I cannot, for the love of God, remember his name. That's just how memorable this game is. We'll call him that guy. Who turns out he was the dragon all along. Remember, we're gonna go back. We're gonna go back. Now, remember I said that these passageways to get to these other lands, you go through caves to get to other lands, and it's all machinery. Keep that in mind. These were sealed, by the way. You unsealed them. Just keep that in mind. You're following me here. We're gonna go back to this. We're gonna have a recap of this story once I'm done. Papa Tipsy is gonna talk about the recap of this story and how many plot holes there are in this game and why this game is bad and why you should never play it. Anyways, so you don't kill the king. No, we can't kill anyone because of Layla and Orakio's law. So you really beat him to near death, and then. Okay, you're about to marry this person, and then your childhood friend's like, no, marry me instead. Okay, so then now is the first split in the game is, okay, either you marry this woman who have no clue who she is, or you can marry your childhood friend who like breaks you out of jail, helps you, gives you all these gems, helps you do all these things, and whatnot. And so who you gonna marry? So this is like where the cool thing is, where the generations of Doom comes from. This is the only good thing about this game is it's a multi-branching game. If you want to get every ending, you need to play the game 4 times to get every possible ending. So depending on who you marry, your son's gonna be different. If you Arakians are very tough and rugged and strong, like the Knight of Arakio, or you have mystical elements of the Queen Layla, like the Leylans. So Leylans are magical inherent, and Arakians are not magical inherent. So depending which path you take, you get different adventures. So if you go with Arakians, you're gonna keep fighting biomonsters because Leylans can't kill Arakians. It has to be with monsters. And also, the reverse is true. When you go the other way, you have to use robots. You can't use humans. Can't kill them. Reasons. So, anyways, depending on who you get different stories, and then eventually you get down to the last generation, the final generation, where you go to this last world connection thing. We haven't figured it out yet, but you eventually learn in the second generation. It's like, by the way, we need to go to this moon thing. We think it's a moon. It's actually not a moon. It's a satellite. And by the way, look down. Yeah, we live on a spaceship. Everyone's like, what? So wait a sec. That's a huge revelation. Wait, we're on a spaceship. So these tunnels are those bridge gaps between a biome. It's like a giant biomes all connected with tunnel machines. So like a circle here, circle here, circle here, circle here. It's like a hexagon, and they're all attached by like these metal passageways. So when you go into these tunnels, those are those metal passageways which were sealed. Okay. So you eventually go to this last biome, and everyone says like, haha, thanks to your grandfather, it was all part of our plan that your grandfather unseals all of these. And then the monsters, they were totally our idea. Ha 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 ha. We are evil. Ha 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 ha. Who are these people again? I have no clue, but apparently they're evil somehow. And the brother Arakio, who's still alive, like, through sheer force of hatred, is here, and you kill him. No, you don't kill him. You beat him within an inch of his life, because we can't kill anyone in this game. And then, story's so stupid. And it turns out, go beneath my throne room, because, there's the real threat. Okay, so you go beneath the throne room, and turns out, lo and behold, it's Dark Force. Ah, Dark Force. He's come back again. But at least unlike Phantasy Star 2's Dark Force, where he's just kind of there, Dark Force 3 is supposedly the guy that manipulated everything, and I'm going to destroy you. And he explains to me, by the way, there was hundreds of these biome ships. Because when Palma blew up 1,000 years ago, this is 1,000 years from the future from this game, I'm going to start explaining the connections between all the games. These are the survivors of the Palmans. By the way, there was like thousands of these super biome ships. There's only 2 left now. Shit. Yeah, you're the last 2. I'm gonna kill you too. And that's basically Dark Force in a nutshell. Now, so basically, Arakio and Layla knew this, and they sealed off all the biomes to trap Dark Force and then try to kill him. And they didn't succeed at all. By the way, Dark Force is also in the treasure chest, just like in the second game, for whatever reason. He just likes tight, confined spaces. What can I say? He likes tight, confined spaces. Alright, so now that we know the story, let's go back. Where did this mysterious woman come from again? If all the tunnels were sealed? Who opened the tunnels to allow a guy, the cool guy who can turn into a dragon, to get over there and have Lady drop it? Plot holes. Plot holes. Let's not think about it too much. Plot holes. Alright, so let's talk about combat. Combat is roughly the same as the second game, except magic is in classes, and you get all 4 spells immediately, and then you can enhance or unenhance and you can control how powerful each spell is through a Technic store. There are certain spells you should never have at the start of the game, and they are broken good. That is all. That is all. The spells animations in this game are horrifyingly bad. The spell animations are horrifyingly bad. None of the items are explained. Some of these items can actually heal things in people, and again, not explained. There are certain items that give you full heal, not explained. The whole gotta find like the super weapon things, just like they stole that from Phantasy Star 2. You do that again. That was so original. This game sucked. Just thinking about it, it sucked. I'm trying to find some positives, but well, there is a positive. The branching system was really cool, but when you have a crappy combat system, terrible graphics, let's get started. Let's talk about music. The music gets progressively worse the more characters you have in your party. Did you know that? They've changed the music. Will legit change and get worse the more characters you get in your party. It's a thing. This game sucked. So bad. Why am I even talking about this game? The bosses in this game were no more stronger than a standard enemy, and because certain abilities that you should not have access to, but you do, are retardedly good, it trivializes everything in this game. So I don't know what to say whatsoever. Oh god, that reminds me. There's a character named Layla. That's the sister to Layla. So Layla's sister is named Layla. Hi, Layla. That's gonna be really confusing. Hey, Layla, can you pass the salt? No, not Layla. No, not you. Layla, please. Oh my god. This story is so stupid. I'm glad this was a side story, too. So glad. Oh my god. This story sucked. This game sucked. Everything about this game was horrible. Alright. That's about all the attention I'll give to this game. So basically, long story short, Palma blew up, but before it blew up, thousands of these ships got off Palma. And most of them got destroyed thanks to Dark Force. And basically, you're just trying to stay alive. You're just basically drifting around in space. The only good thing about this game is the endings, actually. Because the ending to the second game is very interesting. Remember I said I bashed 2 a lot. But when we talk about the ending to 2, it's really cool. I'm gonna spoil a little bit here, because the ending in 2 is Earthlings trapped Dark Force in a chest called Pandora's Box. Because they found Dark Force, and Dark Force destroyed their world. And they wanted to find a new world to inhabit. So they come to the Algo system. And in the Algo system, they almost got away with it by killing off all the Motavians. That's what Mother Brain blah 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 was all for. To kill off the Motavians and the Palmans and the Tellurians and then recolonize the system. So here's the question: how did the humans find the Algo system? Well, at the time, you say, okay, maybe they just mindlessly drift through space for thousands of years, I guess. But there are multiple endings to Phantasy Star 3, and one of those endings, this is the most interesting thing ever, is they go into a time warp because they were approaching a black hole, and they get sucked into a time warp. And when they come out of the time warp, they found this really weird blue planet. And someone was contacting them from the blue planet, and the contact was coming from a place called London. So it turns out you stumble upon Earth with your starship. So it can be inferred that this could be the true ending to 3, whereas you find basically that time warp, which sends you back in time. It's not just a warp. This was 1,000 years after the second game, so we know Earth was destroyed. So you went back in time probably 2,000 years ago, or hundreds of years ago, before the second game, and this was before Earth was destroyed. It can also explain how Dark Force was able to get to Earth in the first place, and how they would eventually trap them on Earth. So they probably let these people who they don't know who they are onto their planet, and then slowly they destroy their worlds. They manage to trap Dark Force, take it with them on their spaceship, and go straight to Algo because they know where Algo is. It's in the data system. Parma will be in the data system on the spaceship that the Parmenians came in from. So it all goes full circle. See what I'm going here? That's the only good thing about Phantasy Star 3. Otherwise, it is a steaming pile of shit. You never should play. Watch a Let's Play or something like that. Don't play it yourself. You're going to take a gun to your head and kill yourself. That is all the time I'm giving to Phantasy Star 3. It was a bad game. It's one giant story, side story. It adds nothing to the series except being referenced in the ending. That one ending. That is it. There's nothing good about this game. Period. Alright. By the way, when they did the remakes of the first and the second game, when they did that, Phantasy Star 3 was the one game that needed a serious makeover job. Oh my goodness, such a bad game. That was the one game that really needed it. Anyways, let's talk about best waifu, or best game, depending on which language you like to use. Phantasy Star 4. Let me preface this, if you don't mind. Phantasy Star 4 was such a good game. As soon as I finished it, I was very close to wanting to play it again immediately. Let me repeat that. As soon as I finished Phantasy Star 4, I was ready to play it again from the beginning. That's how good Phantasy Star 4 was. Here's my rule of thumb. Oh, I forgot to rate Phantasy Star 3. You notice how I skipped over rating it? It's that bad. 1 star. 1 star. That's all Phantasy Star 3 is gonna get from me. 1 star. Phantasy Star 2 was better than Phantasy Star 1. But that's not saying a lot because Phantasy Star 2 was shit. So, just saying. But Phantasy Star 4, though, blew me away. You see, Fantasy... Okay, look, if a game ever makes me want to play it again, and it's not often, it means the game is good. I mean, it sounds silly, like, oh, duh, no shit, if you want to play it again, it must be a decent game, duh. But most games, like, think about it, you play a game, you finish it, and then you put it on the shelf, and you never look at it again for a couple of years. Most games. You know, especially with RPGs and platformers and stuff like that. You tend not to re-pick them up. Now imagine playing an RPG. You just finished it. And you're like, wow. Like, holy shit, oh my god. I want to do it again. Like now. That is a sign of a very, very, very good game. If a game ever does that to you. And Phantasy Star, now I don't have a lot of games that does that to me, but Phantasy Star 4 is one of those games that has done that to me. And that's a good sign. This is going to be a fun review. So, Phantasy Star 4 has been ported. It was never remastered, just like Phantasy Star 3. Sorry, Phantasy Star 2 and 1, there's no 3. Just, you know, 3 was just never released in the US, I guess. It was under like a mystical name, something. No, seriously though, Phantasy Star 4 is essentially the Sega Genesis is Sega Genesis's. There you go. Their swan song. It was at the end of the system's lifespan in about 1996, 1997, early 1997, 1996. I remember specifically this game came out so late in the Sega Genesis lifespan that basically um, Final Fantasy VI came out a couple months later. I remember this. I think Final Fantasy VI was on the verge of coming out, or that we already had Final Fantasy. We had Final Fantasy IV, which was considered at the time probably a really amazing, RPG. And then we had all these amazing RPGs coming out for the SNES. And then we had everyone's like, oh my god, Final Fantasy VI was like just coming out or just came out. It's like it blew everyone away. And then on top of that, like 8 months to like a year later, the PlayStation was ready to come out. So it's like, wow, that's like how late in the lifespan Phantasy Star 4 came out. So we had these amazing, amazing games, and Sega just could not compete on the RPG level with the SNES at this point. Like, we had Chrono Trigger, we're getting Final Fantasy VI, we had a Guy of Illusion, we had, what was it, Lufia, whatever it's called, we had Secret of Mana, we had so many cool games to come out on the SNES for RPGs. And what did Sega Genesis have to show for it? This was the Sega Genesis and Sega's ultimate weapon, Phantasy Star 4. Graphically, it looked similar to 2, but you can tell they took a lot of time and attention to detail to improving the graphics significantly. Not only that, did they take the time to improve the graphics of the game by quite a bit. They also looked at their game and was like, why does our game suck? How do we not make the same mistake as 3? How do we make the game fun, basically? Because by the time 1996, roughly, 1996, 7, maybe 1998, there was a guidebook of how to make a good RPG now. Like, we were no longer reinventing the wheel at the start of the Genesis. We were no longer trying to be innovative. Black Sheep, Phantasy Star 3. So, none of these things were something that people were looking at anymore. Like, we had a book. We knew how to make good games now. So how do we make Phantasy Star 4 not a failure? And they knew now how to not make it a failure. So they looked at their formula of what Phantasy Star was, what it was becoming, and how to change its course and make it better. To really grip this idea of we are in a sci-fi future. And on top of that, by the way, these games are all going to connect, and this is it. In Phantasy Star 4, it ties all those loose ends and connects all the games together, including 3. Can you believe that? This is basically like the pinnacle, the climax that we were all waiting for is in Phantasy Star 4. So what do they do with combat? Let's talk about graphics. It's like Phantasy Star 2 style graphics, but they went way up in production value. Like, way. Everything's beautiful, like really beautiful, really nicely done. The animations on the overworld, superly well done. The animations the characters have, even just in the overworld style, is so much better. Not only did they improve that significantly, the story was top notch. I'll explain the story. They went back to the original first game style of like doing it. They went full manga style, and it's so good. There's actually character portraits and everything now. They brought back, they had a new thing called consultation, or talking to your party members. And these games were like, oh, well, I don't know what to do. Like, everything was cryptic. Phantasy Star 4 was like, okay, let's stop being cryptic, and let's be straightforward. Like, hey, let's talk amongst ourselves and pretend we're giving hits to the player, but we're not going to break the fourth wall. And it was like, what? That's so cool. So you like have to the characters like, hey, hey, this is a pretty cool town. Everything's so relaxing. Hey, you Chaz, you gotta stop doing that. Come, we gotta get this job done over here. We gotta get over the city and get it done. They'll like talk like that, and it's like, oh shit, they're telling me exactly what I need to do if I ever forget. Like, wow, bam, mind blown, big brain moments. Yeah, that's like holy crap. So, and on top of that, not only do the story is so much better, they lead you on better. They give you hints if you're lost. The dungeons are not super complicated. Oh my god, they're not super complicated dungeons for the Phantasy Star 2. Uh, on top of that, the dungeon designs is like, what? They really made the graphics in this game beautiful. Really, they did. Not just the graphics. Graphically was super superior. The music is ultra memorable. Oh my goodness, the combat music. I'm not gonna try and sing it here because I'm gonna butcher it, but like in my head, like I can play out the music so perfectly. Like that's how good the music is. They remastered a lot of older songs and they made it great again. Like holy, my goodness gracious, this game was so good. Yeah, it was so good. The music was amazing. Graphically was amazing. Story was amazing. Story presentation was amazing. Hints were great. It's the first game they actually explain what items do. Now, some items didn't fully explain that they might have a special effect. Now, not every item had it. Most items did, not every item, but they tried. They actually legitimately tried. By the way, the scaling and balance of this game significantly better. There is a strength value. This is so excited. They have toughness and strength. They finally freaking did it. It's not a huge impact, but they had actually included it. They took them long enough. This is also the first game they had elemental effects are in the game. Oh my god, elemental effects! Eee! We can actually one-shot enemies and stuff like that. Oh boy. I'm getting a little too excited. I really, really love Phantasy Star 4. Um, it was a huge step up. Like they realized, okay, we gotta fix this series up, or we're gonna get completely destroyed by Nintendo and the SNES. And they stepped up all the way. They really brought because okay, Phantasy Star 3 had practically zero sci-fi elements other than like, hey, we're on a ship, cyborgs. That was it. Here, 2 was basically futuristic setting, period. But there was no medieval stuff except hey, we got swords for some reason when we all can have guns, I guess. But 4 brought everything together. Brought the Arthurian and the sci-fi and melded it, meshed so perfectly for Phantasy Star. And they did that so well. Oh god, everything about this game is so good. You could be on the open fields and you feel Arthurian with your swords and the legends and stuff. Like everyone's like technology has regressed, but we have bits and bobs of technology. And you go into these basically these ancient outposts and like, wow, there's all this technology, machinery that we've never seen before. It's stuff like that. It's like it brings it all so together so well. By the way, the combat animations is just unheard of. Like they went back to the Phantasy Star 2 style of combat for animations and artwork, but they jacked it up to Dial 11 from Dial 6. The combat animation is so cool. They actually will change their fighting stances. It was so good. They were so pin perfect on this. They will actually change combat stances in animations depending on what you equip them with. So, for example, if you get Chaz a knife, he'll just go up and slash an enemy with a knife. He's like a little dagger slash like that. But if you give him 2 knives, he'll go does like a cross slash with a dagger. It's like, hey, I got 2 hits now. And if you give him a sword, he'll actually do like a hack and slash like that with a sword. You'll see the same thing with Alice or Alice. I'll explain that later. Whereas, you give her 1 boomerang, she'll toss it, pew, like that. If you go 2, she'll go like, ha, pew, here's 2 boomerangs, haha. Like, oh my god, that's so goddamn good. And on top of that, they still have techniques, which are your magics, and they had your standard attacks, same defense. I've been summoned by classic. Hey Lex. So yeah, the the techniques in this game, they still weren't explained. I hated that a lot. It didn't explain it still. And during Phantasy Star 3, I forgot to bring this up. In Phantasy Star 3, they changed the meaning of all the techniques. Now, Phantasy Star in general, except for the first one, it's like fire, water, thunder, blah blah blah. Because in those games, they had conventional names. But in the second one, hey, let's use our own convention. Let's call it Girez and Fear and no, not Fear, Foy and Thu and stuff like that. Who needs to know what any of these names mean? Uh, and And then in 3, it's like, let's change what each thing means. Okay, Girez doesn't mean strong res, it means all heal, even though we just used Sar in the last game for all heal. Then you go back to 4, you're like, okay, Sar's gonna be all heal again. But Daban is not gonna be shield, it's gonna be physical shield. And then Wallah's gonna be magical shield. You got all of that? Huh. So yeah, that was the magics were not explained. You had to have experimented to see what magics did. Ah, it sucks so much. It really did. Um, but otherwise, I mean, it still does like Void still did fire attack and whatnot. And then you had techniques. So you had techniques and no, what's it called? Tech? It was just called tech. I think it was called tech. I can't remember the name they used for it. And these were special abilities. This was new in Phantasy Star 4. Was techs, and that completely changed everything. Like the game originally needed techs. Okay, so it was called tech. Okay, so TP was techniques, and then tech is just special abilities or whatever. Or no, it was called SPL. It's just called special. I can't remember. Anyways, these unique abilities that are only for certain characters give them like some. It's like a super ability. It's like a limit break almost, like the remakes had, basically, quote unquote. Except you can use them whenever you wanted to, and it it made each character unique, and the animations were really really cool. Um, for them in general, and but instead of being limited by magic points or technique points, they were limited by usage. So when you were crawling through a dungeon, it's like, oh no, I need to save my magic for a boss. Instead, now you can divide it between magic or these special attacks. And the game was generous for once to let everyone have enough, you know, a little bit of everything. And it made leveling up useful again. So let's go back. Leveling up in 1, 2, maybe 3, I don't know about that, but we're going to say 3 too. Leveling up only basically unlocked either abilities, increase your HP pool, made you faster, or increase your TP pool. And or magic. 4 changed that and saying, hey, when you level up, you actually get more special ability too. And special abilities are really, really useful because they have any effect. They can be an all heal. They can be a powerful all attack. They can be a powerful single attack. They can have a special status effect. They can be a very powerful useful effect. You wouldn't know any of this because it was never explained. Looking at, what's her name? Oh no, like, oh goodness, she was so useful. I didn't use her in the final final part. It's the chick. It's the Esper chick. Oh goodness, I will remember her name right now. I'm trying really hard. There's steam coming out of my ears. I'm pretty sure you can see it. It was started with an R, didn't it? Kira, thank you. Or Kyra, depending on who you ask. Just like Meow and Mayao. We'll go with Kira. Like, she had a really strong set of abilities, but you would never know what any of them did until you used them. Luckily, the main ones you wanted to look at was Warla and, Medis, which was medicine, and Warla, which was magic shield, and whatnot. What is localization? Yep, what is localization? So yeah, so like I said, those unique abilities were really cool, and they really added a lot of flavor. But here was the cool part, was that you could mix magics, oh sorry, you could mix techniques and special abilities to make super abilities. It was the coolest thing, but I've never, okay, when I played this, when I replayed through all the Phantasy Star games, I actually knew about this. But when I played this as a kid, like, oh god, what's the first time I played? It was like 19 years ago almost. When I played that as a kid for the first time and I saw it, I was like, oh my god, that was the coolest thing. Like, oh god, I can't remember. The first one was I did Blizzard. I was like, oh my god, I never did Grand Cross. I never knew how to do it. But I did Blizzard or Firestorm on Axe. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Like, oh my god, it did so much damage. It looks so cool. This game was awesome. I think I'm gushing too much over it right now. Like I just did when I did the first game, I gave it a fair review. I did the second game, I bashed it, but I tried to be fair. Third game thing, and then I go here and I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing. It and basically, um, it showed the progression though, really, of like they learned from their past mistakes. They learned, okay, what didn't work and what was working, and what our competitors were doing, and how to make it better. So that was just combat in a nutshell. Which, by the way, this is the first game they actually add a message speed and a battle speed option. This was very, very important because it made the game super duper playable. Not just playable, but super duper playable. By the way, did you know there was actual bosses in this game? It took 3 Phantasy Stars to realize we should put bosses in our games. Wow, they might actually be good. Oh, that's a good point. So CrunchyLex, I'm reading chat here. He does bring up combat macros. This was genius. So what these were basically is you could set up what everyone did, and all you would do is push the macro, and it would do it. So you might think like, okay, who cares? It's a macro, whatever. But and you would notice there are certain mob types you would fight, and the mobs didn't really change. They weren't random. So if you knew what the mob types were after delving into a dungeon a couple times, or maybe there's a certain setup you always want to do, you could use the macros to speed up combat even further. They so greatly made their game efficient. Now, that macro system actually originated in Phantasy Star 3. It was a macro system. It was very primitive, but it was there, and you can use that macro system to keep using the ability, but you had to always set it up in combat. It wasn't particularly worked out, I would say. So, but it was there, and they were developing it. They had an idea of it. So, those macros were really, really good too. So, that's just combat and bosses in a nutshell and whatnot. Graphics were great. Like I said, music was god tier. But the one thing I didn't really cover was story, and this is what keeps bringing me back. And what I keep saying is everything will get tied up at the end, which is in Phantasy Star 4. And basically, the game actually had a story. Now, imagine you were playing 3 games in a row and there wasn't a story. But now you actually get a story, and it adds story to where there was no story before. And it all makes sense. Oh. So basically, the story of Phantasy Star 4 is there's biomonsters increasingly running rampant. The world's like turning to shit. And they reference this because, you know, yeah, about 1,000 years ago, Mother Brain kind of died and our lives got total shitty because a jerk named Rolf decided to, Rolf decided to kill Mother Brain and screw us all over. Gosh damn him. I love this series. So, because of that, Motove goes back to a desert hellhole. Because in the second game, thanks to Mother Brain, she changed the flora and fauna to actually something, you know, desirable to live in. And these biomonsters are becoming an increasing threat. And we tried to figure out basically the source of it. And it also turns out, while you're trying to do that, solve that problem, kind of, sort of, well, not really. Here's the thing, it's like, you're not thrown into it, like, we're not doing the first game where it's like, hey, this dictator's a jerk, let's kill him. The game. 2, hey, thing is are happen in do thing please. Second game, third game, fourth game. So fourth game, it's like this. You're just hunters. You're just okay. We're not part of this grand thing or anything. We're just hunters. Okay. We're just trying to make a living. And as the game progresses, like okay, now there's this dark wizard, and he's a jerk, and he's destroying everything. Okay, now this dark wizard just killed my best friend and mentor. I'm going to murder this cunt face. And then just when you think the game, you finally complete this like grand objective. Like, okay, I did it. I did what I was asked to do. I did it. The world's at peace, right? And then just before you're about to turn away, the game throws like a plot twist at you, and it's like, guess what? There's a new threat, and if you don't stop it, the world's gonna blow up, kind of thing. It's like, oh my god, I feel important again. Yeah, the game does that a lot to you, but it does so like in a way that's not like it's not like the second game, and it's like you're just kind of arbitrarily doing things for this overarching mission. Here you don't have an overarching mission. Screw you. You don't really have this overarching mission. You feel like you're like you put your you're in the shoes of Chaz, and who's the main character, and Chaz is he's just trying to get by, and he's been basically he's let Alice. I wonder why they picked that name. No references to anything, huh? Anyways, she's like a mentor, and she's been guiding him. And then once she unfortunately, spoiler alert, so I'm gonna have to spoil it. She unfortunately dies. He kind of like was not sure what he's supposed to do, and he's kind of doing these things, but he's like, why am I doing these things? Like, why am I going on my way? Yeah, the world's ending, but what do I have to do anything with it? I can't do anything about it. I'm just one guy, you know. So the light, totally different. Yep. So, and this kind of culminates throughout the entire story till the very end, which there's something here I can actually appreciate. I'm gonna actually give some backstory about there's a hidden world, and you eventually go to this hidden world, and this all-powerful like ancient being who's telling the story of what's really going on, and everything about Dark Force. Which, by the way, Dark Force loves coming back alive in this game. He's like, yeah, by the way, you're the chosen one. You're gonna have to kill him, and then you finally get this moment of like a fourth wall break, and like Chaz is like, how about go fuck yourself, because none of this makes sense. Why can't you do it? Like, why are we doing all this? You know, none of this is making sense. And then that moment, it's like Lutz is like, which by the way, he does come back. Spoiler alert. And he's like, look, let me show you what's really going on. I can help you with that. And that was like a defining moment. It's like, hey, that just connected to me as a player. Like, hey, I don't know what's going on. None of this is making sense, and now it's all gonna make sense. Like why we're actually doing this, what we're here for, you know. And I love that whole story arc, and you're just kind of going with the flow, and there's always a new danger. It's like a new chapter in the game, and it's so well done. Manga comics. God, I love the cutscenes of this game. Oh yes, the references in this game. There's so many references. The fourth game actually rewards you. Get this. It will reward you for playing the first, second, and third game. Yes, the third game. You're rewarded, I promise you. It's like a 2-second thing, but you're rewarded. In fact, you don't have to play the third game. You could just play the fourth game, and then you have the entire premise of the third game done and covered. Yes. Lexi, that's exactly what I said. It's perfect when you play all three, and you realize how everything finally comes together, and whatnot. And it's just beautiful. And this is actually probably one of the very few games that has actually secrets in it, and those secrets are even more of like freaking, like, hey, you remember that character in that first game and stuff? Well, guess what? He's coming back too. But the best one of the best ones is comes from Phantasy Star 3, and it wasn't for that one cutscene. There is another thing. There's a character in Phantasy Star 4, and he comes from Phantasy Star 3. And I have a lot of big brain moments about this and how it all connects about Ren bots, because Ren is in Phantasy Star 4 and 3, and we know a little bit about Ren in 3 that he's just a cyborg bot designed for combat and utility and maintenance services. Um, so when he comes back from 4, we can assume that he was reactivated. He could not have been built. Because he's in the game, he's 999 years old, which means he was developed a year. So it means, yeah, he was built on Matavia then, because he was developed a year after the destruction of Mother Brain, to the day. Because that's one of the cool things, is they have the ages of everyone, and more specifically, the measurements of Alice. Very important. And you can see how, like, when those ages, like, they actually have meaning, and everything that was in this game has meaning. Alright, so yeah, it's probably, it has to be part of the same series. It's not the same Ren though, because they're side by side. The events of Phantasy Star 3 occurs 1,000 years after the destruction of Palma, and critical plot point, and and where Phantasy Star 4 takes place is 1,000 years also after the destruction of Palma and Mother Brain. So it can be presumed they were part of the same series of robots. But clearly, Ren in Phantasy Star 4 was developed after the destruction of Mother Brain to maintain the satellites with an S around Motavia to help restore order before the great decline of technology. Anyways, overall story is just. It's good. It's good stuff. Everything about Phantasy Star is great. There really isn't a lot wrong with it. And they realized all the bad elements. Let's get rid of them, and then let's focus only on the good stuff. And then let's make the good stuff even better. And if it's existing, let's make it better and not shit like the other games. So. If I had to rate Phantasy Star 4, it's so hard for me to give an honest opinion. Out of 5 stars, I would almost say it's like a 5 almost. But here's the thing: there's no such thing as a perfect game, but Phantasy Star 4 is pretty close to being a perfect game. And the scaling of your characters, the amount of grinding you have to do is not even a thing. You probably actually do accidental grinding. With it and whatnot. It's a culmination of, hey, we did a lot wrong, let's do it right. So it's easily a 4.5 out of 5 game. It's easily. So finally reached the conclusion. I wish I can gush over more about Phantasy Star 4. I would love to, but basically we get it. It's a good game. Surprisingly, there was no remasters, no remakes, and it's actually the least ported Phantasy Star game ever, is Phantasy Star 4, surprisingly. Now, during its time, I do know that Phantasy Star 4 was not super well received, because, you had all these great games on the SNES, you had the PlayStation about ready to come out, and so on and so forth, so it wasn't as well received, but when in retrospect, it was a damn good game. Now, I just remember what I was talking about, and this was a really cool tidbit. It has nothing to do with the review of the game. There are 4 planets in the Algo system according to Phantasy Star 4. You have Parma, or Palm. You have Motavia. You got Dezolas. And then you have Rikros or Rikros? I can never pronounce it. It's a hidden planet that comes around once every 1,500 or whatever years to remind the Algo system, like, hey, by the way, yeah, you have a job to do, jerks. That 4th planet is very important, not just story-wise or anything, but if we go all the way back to the development of the original game, the original developers wanted to have 4 planets in the system when they made the game. That's what they wanted to do, but due to development constraints time constraints and technological limitations, they couldn't do it. So I thought that was a huge, amazing throwback to the original development team when they added Recross to Phantasy Star 4. It was the missing fourth planet that they always wanted to put into the game. And I thought that was absolutely amazing when they did that. Like when you have that back knowledge, like wow, that was really really cool that they at all did that. Um, so I think it's time for some concluding statements here about Phantasy Star, the series, the classic series. Uh, I will have to, at some point, probably play Phantasy Star Gaiden. Maybe, kind of, sort of, not. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a Game Gear guy, so we'll see how that rolls. I mean, it's a side story with Alice that's like 100 years after the original. Cybernetics sleep, blah blah blah. Bring her back, whatever, stuff like that. Um, but it's pretty cool to see the evolution of the game. You're here first, folks. Crunchylex claims Gaiden is a terrible game. It's not worth it. So, don't have to play it. There you go. So, but it's really cool when you play in the Phantasy Star universe, and the way that they were developing the games, and you play them in order, and you go through them all. It's so cool to see how the world evolves. How you're going to the same places. It's not some new magical land every time you replay the game the next in the series. But you can see like it's the same cities you're going to too, and you see how each one evolves, how graphically they improve, how they expand the story and whatnot, how the cities rise up and fall. It's so cool, and it's not very many games that can claim to do this in the retro era as well. It's just really interesting and whatnot. I'm glad that some of these games are getting remasters. That are getting updated, like on the Switch, the original one got a nice, much-needed update. Hopefully the second game gets that same treatment to not be bad. Please. Please, anything to not make it bad. Even the remake, the remake was worse than the original game. Like, they tried to fix it and they failed so badly it was worse. So, there's that too. But, and then third game. Anyways, moving on. Third game. Every game had its place in the series, and it was very interesting that how they managed to pull that off. Yeah, bundle. Yep, that's right. I talked about that. How the second game had to have a hint book to even be playable. That was like, if your game has to be done like that, like I mentioned it in the Phantasy Star 2 section of this, talking about classic games. If you had to do that, then your game was terrible, like really bad. But while it wasn't all there for the entire series, it definitely had a lot of charm, and that charm would definitely carry over into what I call the second wave. And it's just interesting how they, at the end of the entire journey, they managed to take what was something that was, as the series was falling apart, and tie it all back together and make it something amazing. Was just impressive in its own right. And then what kind of makes me sad is I wanted to see more of it, like more of that algo system, more of how it evolves over further in time. And while that doesn't happen in the second wave, which is Phantasy Star Online, Phantasy Star Zero, Phantasy Star Blue, something Blue Sphere, I think. While it doesn't happen like that, it does take the game to new galaxies, new stories, new adventures. And really, when you reach the end of 4, it finally says basically that's it. I mean, we're done here. Like, there just can't be more. I mean, that's all, folks. But, they kind of do a good job and really expand the series beyond just the original classics. And hopefully, eventually in the future, I'll do the second wave of games and give those a shot, see how those roll. But I'm kind of happy I went back and replayed all the games from the classic series. I'm kind of glad I did it, except Text Adventures, which I was almost tempted to do Text Adventures because I loved the idea of the characters in the second game, but I wanted the story to go with them, and the remake did not do it justice, and the original game just didn't flesh it out. I want to know more about goddamn Rutger. He was a hero, damn it. He was a hero. He was a war hero. It's like freaking going back to Vietnam or something when his family died. I want to know more. All right, so here's a fun fact though. I've noticed this. This was the weirdest thing ever. So we have all 4 games of Phantasy Star. You would figure that Phantasy Star 4 would have the most fan works and art and everything. You figure because it's so good, it's like so memorable, so everything. And then you would figure Phantasy Star 3 not so much. It was not particularly good. Period. Well, it turns out, for whatever reason, I don't get this. Phantasy Star 3 has the most fan stories, artwork, everything. It doesn't make sense. I don't know why. And Phantasy Star 4 has the least amount of fan art and stories. It does have a fan-made game, but that's about it. I cannot understand that whatsoever. And usually whenever Sega likes to do a throwback, they don't do Phantasy Star 4. And they said they use characters from Phantasy Star 1 and 2 as like throwback images, like when they're talking about their older games. It's like, come on. That's true. Yeah, Phantasy Star 3 had tons of unexplained characters and practically no story and backstory, but everyone likes making art of it. It's so crazy. Doesn't make sense. My mind doesn't make sense. Quick, Nippon people, make more Phantasy Star 4 artwork. It's good. Yes, that is true. Days Ni or Nine, or the Knights of Ni, as I say, she's probably like the only one that really comes out. But from Phantasy Star 2, a lot of the characters are really interesting, and they tried to give them a little bit more backstory in Phantasy Star 2, but they didn't give them the character behind it, which really sucked. Because the characters in Phantasy Star 2 are really good, and when Ni dies, it's like, oh shit, she died. You know, like you get that, you know. It's not as like as powerful as freaking Alice dying. Alice dies. Moment of silence, please. Anyways, I felt the breeze calling. Yep, I felt the breeze calling. Yep, that's Shira. She would take an item from a store and leaves your party, no matter where you are. So you could be in Dezolas, and she'll go all the way back to Motavia somehow. She'll do that. That was the silliest thing ever, and it made the game so bad. She was also the worst character, period. Sorry. Ooh, that burns. So in final conclusion, if anyone is even considering playing Phantasy Star, the series, from 1 through 4, I would say do it. I would recommend either playing for the first game, play the remake to the first game, which is Generations 1, or if you want that true classic experience, don't hurt yourself, do the Switch version. Please do the Switch version. It's so much better than the original. If you're going to do the second game, use an emulator, use the maps, and take advantage of save states. You're in for the long haul when you do that one. Don't be afraid. That hint book came with the original game. It's designed that you use it. You will get lost in that game, period. And then for Phantasy Star 3, and then for Phantasy Star 4, definitely highly recommended. Even if you're not going to play all the Phantasy Star games, at least do Phantasy Star 4. So that's why I say, if you're going to do Phantasy Star 1, do Switch version if you want classic, or do the remake. Very good. Phantasy Star 2, I wouldn't even bother with the remake. It's not that great. But the Phantasy Star 1, use an emulator, save state it. Don't be afraid to use the fast forward button, please. Phantasy Star 3, Phantasy Star 4, again, straightforward. Okay, I'm gonna stop joking about Phantasy Star 3. I get it. It's a bad game. It's a terrible game. I get it. I mean, if you really hate yourself, sure, try it. I doubt you're gonna finish the game if you try Fantasy Star 3. Uh, it's just I'm having a hard time advocating for Fantasy Star 3. It's just not that good. Okay, so Lex is saying I'd rather play 3 than 2 personally. That's a tough call between the two. It's a really tough call. See, 2 actually has a story and it has characters with oomph behind it. 3, on the other hand, has butts. If you're a butt guy, you're gonna love 3. There's a lot of butts in 3. That's the big thing. Which is okay. So okay, he brings up a good point. The generation system, which I have praised in the Phantasy Star 3 section, as the only good thing about Phantasy Star 3, it adds replayability, and you get different perspectives on the story, and you get different endings. And I talked about that already, but how many people are? I was even willing to replay the game through this different generations. After the first time, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna use YouTube on that one. Yeah, it's just like, there's just no way I would be able to handle that. It's just, the game is not very good. I mean, as much as I like butts, I just can't put myself through that. Crunchylex, you're a much better person than I am if you can do multiple playthroughs of Phantasy Star 3. I make no excuses. Now, I'm gonna be honest though, at the same time, I had no desire to replay Phantasy Star 2. Look at the Phantasy Star 2 section of this video whenever I post it, or just the VOD. And that kind of explains why I'll never do 2. I mean, if I give it 2 stars, there's a reason why I'm giving it 2 stars. But strangely enough though, Phantasy Star 1's a lot of I feel really good replayability, especially with the remakes and the remasters editions. And Phantasy Star 4, like I said, I had to physically stop myself from immediately replaying the game. That's how good it was. And I'll probably, now that I'm done with the series, I'll have to try to fight the urge a little bit longer, but I still might actually replay it again. Because I missed a few of the secret stuff, and I want to go back and replay the whole game to get the secret stuff. And see how efficiently I can play the game, and so on and so forth. Alright, so that's going to wrap this up. Little podcast here, a little podcast VOD about Phantasy Star. And my journey through all 4 classic games. Hopefully I will somehow survive the second wave games and actually try those out. There is, even though they're mostly online, there is single player elements to them. So I'll definitely try those out. There is a story. There's story detachments. Although I don't think it'll be as memorable, but there's no more to find out. So thank you all for joining me. If you said stop in or watching the video. And whatnot, so I hope you get like my opinions on it on Fantasy 1, 2, and 4. We don't talk about 3 ever again. I'm not gonna look at it. Okay, one parting note before I close this whole thing out. I actually owned 3. That was the only Phantasy Star game I actually physically got to own. And I didn't know there was better Phantasy Star games out there until I got to try Phantasy Star 4. Which I remember when my brother tried it, I was like, I gotta try it. I'm like, ah. So I knew nothing but Phantasy Star 3. Now I thought it was the greatest thing in the world when I was a young kid, about like 7 or 6 years old. Like, this was so cool. This is Phantasy Star 3. Cool. And then I played Phantasy Star 4 and I realized, what the fuck was I playing? So that's my little story when it comes to Phantasy Star 3. Wait, there's a speed run of Phantasy Star 3? Oh my goodness, it exists! Quick, hide in a bunker! Anyways, so that's my whole podcast and talk about Phantasy Star series as a whole. I would recommend anyone to give it at least a try. And if you can't try it, please just do at least Phantasy Star 4. It's that good. So I will leave you guys with my ending screen, and then once again, I hope you guys enjoyed. So I will see you next time. Hopefully, we'll do Phantasy Star the second wave. So we'll see Phantasy Star Online 1, 2, 0, and Blue Sphere, I think. We'll look into it. Alright, so until then, I will see you guys later.